Tai labas rytas visiems.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Iš tiesų,
It is my pleasure to invite you and to welcome you at that conference. I'm grateful to the State Audit Office, the National Audit Office, and for their cooperation with the Committee on Economy. Energy is one of our priorities, and personally, as a politician, I always care most about the final costs for the end user, and what can we do to make sure that the end user pays the lowest cost. On the other hand, our geographical position means that our decisions have to calculate the geopolitical effects. Sometimes we are forced to take decisions that are costlier for our end users, but ensure independence for our country. I mean, energy independence, and I will not take any more of your time because we have very impressive speakers. I'm glad that Rimantas Šadžius, former Minister of Finance, is here together with his colleague from the European Audit Office, whom you most probably know. And I know that his overview and his report have not been yet publicly advertised, and we will hear a lot of news. The National Audit Office head is here, and it's most interesting for us to hear what are the priorities of the ministry from the minister in energy sector. The energy sector is a dynamic and changing process. Welcome once again to the conference. I'm glad to see you, and I invite you to be active and to take every opportunity to ask questions to the participants. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all the people who have energy, because for them, they have got up early and they're using their energy by now. You know, I can see my role in this event as a minor step towards a deeper debate. We want to promote insights and open self-critical analysis. Several years ago, 193 countries agreed on 17 Sustainable Development Goals, including energy sector. We have 169 measures and a lot of concepts and words. I said that on purpose. I wanted to feel your response. I wanted to feel your feelings. From these statements, we lack the energy because formalism, formal, nice strategies and goals, as well as documents on energy and climate change, abound. Even so, it's boring to take in all the information on the real energy importance in our life. I will be provocative today. I will be untraditional. I would like to invite the audience to come closer to our conscience, to our spirits. And when we talk about energy and resources, we should think not only accounts, not only complex power lines and networks, factories and monsters made of steel, I wanted to see the world, air and the earth, lakes and rivers, oceans and sustainable nature. This is when we have the feeling that we need to do something. We get more meaning, and we understand the needs for deadlines and for energy agenda. It has been classical to use in ministerial meetings that we make progress. But I will provoke you. I think in energy sector we are not lagging behind. We know that in order to not lag behind, we need to know where we are headed for. We need to have an address. And when we don't know where we are headed for, we never get there. And we never get late. In order not to get late in energy sector, we need to have a real and fact-based strategy. We are at a standstill. Some buses are going along, but we're in a standstill. You will say that's not true. You will say we're doing a lot. Yes, we're doing a lot, but if we talk about separate energy sectors and separate individual projects, whatever they are and however right they seem to be in isolation, we don't see the whole body and whole impact, and we don't estimate whether these roads and these projects are cost effective and effective at all, and what will their result be. A well-known strategist said that his strategy was to have no strategy. This is when nobody will stop him or win over him. But this is not the area of no strategy, and I'm happy to claim that. I'm happy that we have the initiative to be together, and we have exceptional guests, high officials in our meeting today. They have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of best experience, and I firmly believe that today our debate will end up with certain commitments and the hope that the real conscience will prevail. So I will leave you at that. Thank you for the floor. I'm happy to be here. But first of all, by way of tradition, I sincerely want to thank for the opportunity and privilege to be in the Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania and to talk to such a huge audience, not only here, but also at TV sets and computers. It is a privilege to be here with my colleague Philwyn Owen, and we attach a great importance to this occasion. This means that the National Audit Office and two of us together have good relations with Lithuania. Phil is a good friend of Lithuania. And secondly, we have very good relations with the National Audit Office of Lithuania. And I would like to thank the head of the National Audit Office for that. And thirdly, the Audit Office has a good relationship with Seimas, with Parliament of Lithuania. Today, I had a meeting already with the Speaker of Parliament. And I am grateful to the head of the Committee on Economic Affairs for the invitation to this conference, because this is a new horizon for the National Audit Office in its cooperation with the Parliament, because previously we traditionally cooperated with the Committee on European Affairs and Committee on Audit. So now I'm happy to start the cooperation with the Committee on Economic Affairs, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. When the National Audit Office publish their reports in the very second page of the reports, they announce their mission and their functions, because this is not the most popular European institution. So let me present to you these affairs, the Audit Office of the European Union, the European Union institutions.
The European Council is the institution that provides guidelines for the EU. There are other European institutions that actually mean a lot to our life, to the functioning of the single market. And the European Commission is a very important institution that supervises and helps to find certain solutions in case of the disagreements or conflicts. And in Luxembourg, we have another institution, the court, Cour de Justice in French, and we also have Court of Auditors there. The word is translated differently. In Lithuanian, it may mean the chamber, the court, but those two institutions, the Court of Justice and the Court of Auditors, have something in common. They take decisions in a collegial manner. Decisions are binding. The auditors present recommendations that have to be implemented. Otherwise, you will have to present a grounded explanation, reasons why you failed. And the system is not very simple. The auditors are not really favorable representatives for people. And we, on our side, understand that what we observe, it is necessary to present not only to the stakeholders, but to the public as well, so that mistakes are not repeated again. But speaking about the Court of Auditors, that is responsible primarily for the analysis of annual reports, meaning that all the costs have been spent in a legitimate way. A big portion of our work is also the audit of performance, the audit of efficiency, and, as we say, value for money. Do we really receive the value, the total value that we are supposed to? 36 performance audits have been published in 2016, and they actually cover all the areas of member states' activities. In this slide, you can see the structure of the court. 28 members delegated by all member states who pledged themselves to be independent to the Court of Justice. We have 5 colleges, so that we could not only formally stamp what is being tabled, and those 5 colleges make a detailed analysis of what has been presented. in different fields. The fields are listed here on the slide, and as you can see, they cover all the areas of European policy. The areas that, on the one hand, require sufficient resources from the EU funds, while on the other hand, the performance results in these fields are important to European citizens only if even they don't think about it at the first sight. Sustainable use of natural resources, energy, climate change, agriculture, a very important field. All these belong to the first college, and I am really happy to present to you the dean of this college, Mr. Phil Owen, today, and who is going to speak about energy in his presentation. The second college, where I work, covers investments to coherence, the growth and integration, employment, education and culture, insurance markets. The fifth college deals with the annual budget audit of the European Union budget. All these areas are of equal significance, and we would not be able to present all the results in one conference, even though we would be willing to. The European Union budget is large. It's 144 billion euros, which sounds very impressive to such a small country as Lithuania. On the other hand, it's just 1% of all the member states' GDP. The public costs account for 40 to 53% of the overall GDP in our member states. And of course, these funds are not fully sufficient. But our main goal is to ensure that each euro out of this amount bring a real added value. We all have to work for it. The priorities of the European Court of Auditors in 2017 are different and diverse. However, the first one is related to energy and the climate change. The auditors working in the European Court of Auditors are highly qualified specialists. They are specialists in audit analysis, however, not in public relations. And this is why the duty of members of the court, including me and my colleague, is to present the results and the insights to you that have been found by professional auditors acting fully independently, not because of some political attitudes. This is some kind of a picture of what things look like and how the specialists could assess the performance from the material that we provide and generate. I'm really happy that we have the Vice Minister of Energy here with us today because he represents the ministry, the executive power, who should actually react to what we present. I am delighted now to pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Phil Owen, who will present to you the insights from the energy sector.
Aš tik tai gal pasakysiu, kad mes turim vertimą.
We have the interpretation, so please use the headphones in order to hear the interpretation into Lithuanian. Phil, the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you, Romantis, for your kind introduction to the work of the court and to myself. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our chair and members of the Parliament and the committee today for providing this opportunity to talk about the work of our court, the European Court of Auditors, in the field of energy and climate. I should say personally, as a Welshman, I'm delighted to be here again in another smaller but beautiful and romantic and committed nation, and it's great to see some familiar faces around the table. In that context, I was last here in Vilnius just over a year ago, last March, when I presented our report on the EU's internal energy market and energy security in this building, including to some of you. So I won't repeat much about that specific study today, although it may come up in discussion, but I have other things to talk about. What I will talk about is the ECA's recent publications generally on energy and climate, which are several, and also reports that are in the pipeline to be published soon. I will talk about our emerging landscape review of energy and climate due for publication later this summer, which is an overview. And I think I will also, if there's time, mention a recent ECA special report of relevance to you here on nuclear decommissioning, including Ignalina. So, turning to the overview of our publications on energy and climate first, I have listed for you on the next two slides, and I'm not going to read them out, you will be pleased to hear, a range of approximately 30 to 40 reports on energy and climate that we have published in the last 7 years, this decade. So this is a growing field of expertise and interest for our court because, as Romantis said, it is a field of great challenge and also EU, and I know here, national priority. So in the mitigation area, we've looked at greenhouse gas emissions in the EU ETS system. In energy, we've covered topics such as renewable energy and energy efficiency in previous years, and we're doing more studies in renewables this year as I speak. In transport, we've looked at a range of, this is one of the largest sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, and we've audited across rail, sea, river, and urban transport. In the agriculture field, we obviously take great interest in this field since it's one of the two largest areas of EU expenditure, and we have looked at a range of sustainable resource issues around rural infrastructure, renewable energy in that field. I've just started a study, for instance, on floods protection. Recently published a study on food waste. We have one being published at the moment on Natura 2000, etc. Water and waste, very key features. And there we have had a great deal of expertise on auditing water projects, which I think will become increasingly important going forward, sadly. And in climate finance, I recently published a report on the European Union's commitment to spend 20%, €1 in 5, of the EU budget on climate change. I won't speak about that today, but that's available on our website if you want to look at it. That just gives an overview of what we've been doing. In terms of forthcoming reports, I will say a little bit in a moment about our landscape review of energy and climate, which is not in and of itself an audit, but it is an overview both of all that work we've done and also the work the 28 national audit institutions, including Arrhenius's national institution here, have done in the past several years. We have got some forthcoming special reports due for publication soon, and I know Romantis is doing excellent work with your Parliament to make sure that as these are published, there will be something on your website making you aware of them. So just to flag the ones in the energy and climate area, which may be of interest to some of you, we have this year reports due to come out on drinking water and the greening of the Common Agricultural Policy, so-called greening. Next year, renewable energy in rural areas, air quality, financial instruments, and I'm working on one on flood prevention, which I've just started. In terms then of our landscape review of energy and climate, for which I'm the responsible member, I just want to share with you one slide. If you remember nothing else, I hope you will remember this slide, because you may be thinking this conference was billed as about energy. Why is he talking about energy and climate? Well, energy production, mainly from the transformation and combustion of fossil fuels, and energy use by industry, households and transport, accounts for 79%, over 3/4 of European EU greenhouse gas emissions. That means that, as a result, effective action on energy production and use is essential to tackling climate change. And what it means when one begins to analyse this over coming decades is there will be a need for huge energy transformations and societal transitions around us in every aspect of how we work and live. This in turn, for those in government like yourselves and us, raises serious questions of governance, planning, accountability, and, dare I say, audit. But this means there are also big opportunities. This transition means there are opportunities for new sorts of economic development and employment for those who embrace such transformations. So this slide is important because what I wanted to say is that whether you come at this issue from an energy background or an interest in climate issues, in my view, you cannot understand the energy or climate challenge in the EU without understanding the two together. That's why the Commission, the European Commission, has one commissioner for energy and climate, who looks, Miguel Arias Cañete, the Spaniard, who looks at tackling these two issues in tandem. And that's why we've brought them together in our Chamber 1, as Romantis explained, looking at the sustainable use of natural resources, looking at climate and energy and farming and fisheries all together in one piece. So that's the context for my talk and why we decided to do a study, a landscape review of all that had been found in energy and climate audits in recent years. Again, just to get the context, we often hear about a target average increase of temperature of no more than 2 degrees centigrade due to climate change. But that is a global average. Actually, whatever we do, temperatures will increase by far more than 2 degrees centigrade in certain regions. They've already risen by 1 degree compared to pre-industrial era. This chart shows the likely temperatures, even on a 2-degree scenario. That's assuming successful mitigation by the last 30 years of this century compared to the first 30 years of my life. That's a coincidence, but that's compared to 1961 to 1990. And what this shows is that in the EU, during the winter, the temperatures, even on a 2-degree scenario, and we could be facing worse if we don't succeed, temperatures might increase by 10 degrees centigrade in the winter in Scandinavia, and in the summer, temperatures might increase by 3 to 4 degrees or more in much of Spain. Let's just have a look at precipitation. Often people don't talk about the rain and the snow that we will see, as well as the heat. But this can be very serious. From an increase in winter of more than 75% in some parts of Central Europe and Scandinavia by the last 30 years of this century, to a decrease in summer of more than 75% on the Mediterranean coast. And you can see extreme heating across much of southern Europe. Lithuania, if I'm sure you're looking carefully for it, is looking towards much wetter winters for our children as they grow up and much drier summers. Now, what that means in aggregate is that the EU needs to prepare itself, as do individual member states, for adaptation to climate change, as well as the necessary mitigation to stay within this 2 degrees. And it will mean more water scarcity, more change in biodiversity, and possibly, when you think about the human effects, more migration, including potentially internal migration northwards within our union. And the challenge on the mitigation side is massive. In October 2009, the European Council set a reduction target for Europe and other developed countries to 80 to 95% reduction in emissions by 2050. The European Climate Foundation launched a roadmap study to assess the implications for all parts of European industry, particularly the electricity sector. This chart shows that to achieve these goals, big changes will be needed in many sectors of the economy, starting with energy and industry, but also transport, buildings, waste and agriculture will all have to change. And you can see from now on, the pace of change needs to accelerate. That was just context. Having done specific audits, and many as I showed you, and we still have many specific audits of energy and climate underway, we decided as a court it would be sensible to complete an overview, a landscape review of energy and climate. This is not an audit, it has different objectives. This slide explains what a landscape review is. It's to consider broad themes on the basis of our existing published research and that of other EU audit institutions. As a basis for this sort of dialogue and discussion and debate and consultation with stakeholders, such as national parliaments, yourselves, the Council, the Commission, the European Parliament, so the legislators, both nationally and EU-wide, can have the context in considering policies and regulations going forward. It enables the court to submit observations and pose questions on some of the challenges we face, which wouldn't naturally lend themselves to audit. But we will not be providing specific recommendations. We might simply, as I said, identify challenges and questions for discussion and debate. To prepare this report very briefly, we looked at over 60 pieces of EU legislation and policy. We visited 3 big member states where some of the tensions and challenges are very evident: Spain, Germany, and Poland. We talked across the Commission to most of the Director Generals and their staff, EU bodies and other organisations such as the UNFCCC, the OECD, and other experts in this field. And as I said, we studied a huge number, over 200 relevant reports, not only by ourselves, but by bodies such as Rimantis and his colleagues in the other EU member states. And we surveyed them all, and all 28 responded to our survey. We started work in mid-July. We hope to publish later this summer, and we will have a significant conference, I hope, this October in Brussels to explain the report fully and prompt debate. We will look at 3 things. First, a very simple, I hope, overview of what is going on. We believe the value added just of this may be very useful. I have struggled to find a single neutral, objective, independent discussion, explanation of what EU energy and climate policy is. Obviously, the Commission produces documents, but those can be seen as partial in some ways. We are an independent body. We will try and lay out for citizens and yourselves just what's underway. Second, we will summarise ours and other audit institutions' main findings in recent years. And thirdly, we will highlight some of the big messages, challenges arising for debate to give context to the big legislative debate that will be going forward in the European Parliament and in national parliaments, particularly around the Commission's so-called winter package of energy reforms. Just to give you a flavour, our analysis of audit reports from national auditors' offices and ourselves showed that European national audit offices had already covered and are covering a wide range of different topics on climate and energy over the past 5 years, this is. National audit offices are producing over 50 reports a year. That's around 2 per audit office each year, which may be 1 on energy, 1 on climate on average, maybe not that much. And the distribution and focus varies. Indeed, you can see from this that audits in the energy sector make up by far the largest share of relevant reports, around 40%. Some aspects of energy have been looked at by several audit bodies across the EU, and we will pull out some generic difficulties identified. For instance, in the field of renewable energy, we have identified several relevant reports and 3 common themes from audit offices at the micro level, looking at national schemes. One is there are often obstacles to investments in renewable energy. Just simple obstructions like non-connection to the electricity grid. Bit of a problem if you want to sell your electricity. Secondly, lack of cost effectiveness in the design of schemes. And thirdly, issues with monitoring and evaluation. So it's very hard to define success, measure performance. And yet, our landscape review will also show that analysed at the macro level, in the field of renewables, for instance, we have seen very rapid growth in renewable industries in the EU in recent years. It must be one of the fastest growing industrial sectors, if not the fastest, in the EU. And the costs, for instance, of wind and solar have been falling significantly compared with 10 years ago, such that they're increasingly cost competitive. Now, that is not the sort of issue that an individual national audit office can identify when doing a study of a specific scheme in a specific member state, but which we will bring out in the landscape review. So there's a sort of short-term value for money issue, but also a long-term one here that we need to think about collectively. We will also flag, partly for the benefit of our own and Aronius's profession, some of the areas that have been less audited to date. Adaptation, the fact that we're going to have to adapt to inevitable climate change, and there will be large amounts of public money necessary to do that. The third phase of the crucial emissions trading scheme in Europe, and emissions in the key sectors of transport and agriculture, and even the monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions, both nationally and EU. We as auditors, mea culpa, we haven't audited these areas enough yet, so we're partly using a landscape review to identify and challenge ourselves about where we may go on your behalf, parliamentarians and citizens, going forward. We will also seek, as I said, to summarise some of the major challenges arising from the whole field, gleaned from the audit reports, the specific audit reports we've looked at. And this just gives you a flavour. This isn't finalised yet, so this is very provisional. But we will probably look under 7 headings. First of all, governance. How can we make it most effective? This is a radical transformation of key economic sectors, all the key economic sectors. How can we make sure that both the EU and member states, both within a member state and between member states, work most effectively together? In terms of the energy transition, the industry is changing massively. How can we make sure that is done most efficiently in a way that benefits citizens' lives? Thirdly, are we using for this the best data, modelling and analysis? This is a typical sort of auditor's remark, but it really matters that you know that you've got the right numbers and the right modelling in a complex field like this. Fourthly, adaptation is going to be necessary and it will cost a lot of public money. How can the EU and member states plan, understand and tackle that before it hits you in the form of floods and droughts? and then we may all panic and spend too much money or the wrong ways. So how can we actually prepare for that? And again, make sure we spend money effectively and efficiently. Financing. However efficient we are, this is going to take a lot of money. Where is that going to come from? Public or private? What is the mix? How can it best be raised? What is the balance of financing? Research and innovation is crucial. In many areas, the technology may not yet exist, such as electricity storage, in a form and on the scale that will be required. So how can we best, both as an EU and as member states, foster and develop innovation that will be necessary before 2050? How can we in the next 10 years support the right scientific developments? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, and I hope this will resonate with politicians like yourselves, how do we inform and involve our citizens so they understand the radical transformation that is underway and they buy into it, and they will have to eventually pay for it in one form or another? And how can they participate in it? So these are the big themes that we see emerging from the audits and the transformation essay. I hope that's a useful flavour of our landscape review. If we have maybe 5 or 10 minutes more, I'm looking to the chair.
15 minutes.
Okay, 15 minutes max. And Chair, please stop me, because as you can see, I'm a great enthusiast. I've spoken about our internal energy market report. I won't speak about that. I'm very happy to talk to anyone afterwards if they want to know what we made of the European Union's attempt to build an internal energy market. But I thought I should say a little bit about our recent nuclear decommissioning report published in 2016, because this, I know, is of great interest to many of you. Our audit work, though published in September of last year, our audit work actually finished last spring. So it's about a year old. So in some areas, including Ignalina, I believe there has been some progress since we reported. But the slow pace of nuclear decommissioning programs inevitably means that most of our findings are, I believe, still highly relevant. So we looked at Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Slovakia. Why? Because the closure and subsequent decommissioning of Soviet-designed first-generation reactors in these 3 member states was made, as you know, a condition for accession. Lithuania, I know, and we've made clear to the European Parliament, has a particular challenge. It's a relatively small member state with 2 Chernobyl-style reactors to decommission, which has never been done before. Chernobyl has simply been covered with a sarcophagus, it hasn't been decommissioned, and with no ongoing nuclear energy business. So you have a huge challenge in Ignalina. Therefore, the EU agreed to provide financial support starting in 1999. By 2020, EU support for nuclear decommissioning, I'm looking at the left-hand column here, will total almost 3 billion euros, of which Lithuania will have received about half, over 1.5 billion euros. So you can see why an audit was necessary. The main audit question was to assess whether progress had been made, particularly since 2011, when we did our first study. So as auditors often do, as you'll find with Arunius, we often come back 5 years later to see what has changed. We did not cover, it's always important to say what we did not cover, I've listed them here, but in particular we did not cover safety or security issues. This was not a nuclear safety audit, it's a financial audit. And we in no way sought to make the case for or against nuclear energy or to define the EU supply mix or the national supply mix going forwards. Our approach was to intensively visit all 3 sites. I personally visited Ignalina and the Bulgarian site, met with Key Commission and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development officials. We also went to the geological repository being dug for high-level waste, Finnish waste, in Finland. So what did we find? Well, we found that some progress had been made, thankfully, since 2011. In all three sites, the dismantling of lower radiation level areas, such as the turbine halls, is now well advanced. But the really difficult work, critical challenges in higher radiation areas, such as the nuclear reactors themselves, largely still lies ahead. We concluded, because of delays and cost overruns in many projects, that dedicated EU funding programs as they stand for nuclear decommissioning had not created the right incentives for timely and cost-effective decommissioning. And by end 2015 at least, not all of the expected outputs used by the European Commission to assess progress towards so-called irreversible closure had been fully met, as shown in this slide. There have been one or two elements of progress here. For instance, Bulgaria's now got a decommissioning license for 2 units. There's a little bit more green, but not much on this chart, as I understand it, over the past year. So some way to go. On waste management, which is critical to decommissioning, you can't take things apart unless you've got somewhere to put the waste. 3 member states have made some progress, but there have been delays on key infrastructure projects. Many have experienced delay. I'm sad to tell you that the longest delays we found had been in Lithuania, where the decommissioning end date since 2011 had been postponed by a further 9 years to 2038. And challenges remained in each of the 3 member states. This slide simply gives one example of a major project that had been severely delayed in each member state. I'm pleased to hear I think there is some progress now on the interim storage in Lithuania, but that was after a long period of delay. And talks in all 3 member states on potential final disposal solutions for the high-level waste and the spent nuclear fuel were still largely only at a conceptual stage. So overall, we concluded that the estimated cost of decommissioning these 3 plants would be, looking at the top right-hand corner of this chart, 5.7 billion euros. But if you added in, and of that, Lithuania, the financing gap in Lithuania for decommissioning costs and financing had increased to over 1.5 billion euros since 2011, much smaller in Bulgaria and Slovakia. And the size of dedicated funds in Lithuania, as you may know, certainly at 1 January 2016 was very small, only a few million euros. So the decommissioning finance gap, particularly here, was a significant challenge. And how had money been used? Well, staff levels have declined naturally in decommissioned plants, but some EU funds we found were still being used, including here, for the costs of staff working on things that were not direct decommissioning work. Looking at the aggregate cost, of course, I said 5.7 billion euros for these 3 sites. But actually, when you add in the final disposal of high-level waste, I'm looking in the right-hand column at the first and second 2 yellow numbers. So 5.7 billion euros in the top right-hand corner for narrowly defined decommissioning, taking the plants apart. But you can double that if you look at the middle figure in yellow on the right-hand side, if you add in the costs of final disposal of high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. We found the Commission's assessment of member states' ex-ante conditionalities was inadequate, as did its own internal auditors. Our main auditee is the Commission, so we give them a much rougher time than we give member states. So I want you to know that. We were quite critical of the work they had done. The future costs of nuclear decommissioning and final disposal are not always recognised. And the accounts, and this isn't just a boring auditor's point, it's very difficult to find the total liability in anyone's accounts, and that's a problem. That's a problem for accountability and galvanising people to action. The Commission, in replying to our report, said they would publish 2 important reports. One, an assessment of ex-ante conditionalities by October, which they did by November. And they also promised an assessment of national programmes that may be of particular interest to you. We still await that. That's late. We made 8 recommendations, which I summarise on this slide. I won't read them all out, but we of course called for more progress in decommissioning, getting on with the job in hand, because these cannot just be left. They have to be cleaned up now. But also to develop solutions for the disposal of spent nuclear fuel. Respecting the polluter pays principle would suggest a necessary increase in national co-financing, including in the current financing period. And we recommended that the dedicated funding programme for nuclear decommissioning stop after 2020. But I wanted to end by briefly explaining what exactly we recommended there. So I'll just flash on to so-called recommendation 5 and talk you through this, and then I will stop, and thank you for being so patient with me. What we said to the Commission was dedicated funding programmes for decommissioning in these 3 member states should be discontinued after 2020 because they hadn't incentivised the right actions. There had been delay, there hadn't been enough progress. But we went on to say, which may be of special interest here, that if a clear need for the use of EU funds beyond 2020 is established in one or more of the 3 member states, and I have said in the European Parliament that Lithuania may well be that one, given the scale of the challenge you face, that any future EU funding proposed by the Commission and agreed by the legislator, the Council and the European Parliament should include the right incentives to get on with the decommissioning by being time limited and by being based on an appropriate level of member state co-financing. We said one way to do this would be to consider widening access for member states to use of European structural and investment funds. I've spoken of the social transformations necessary. I've worked in areas such as the European Regional Development Fund, the European Social Fund. We don't see why those monies should not be available for this work if member states so decided. But that's a very controversial issue, I'm sure, both here and in the European Parliament. But that's one suggestion. Please note, you probably may not even be able to read it, so I'll read it for you, the footnote. We put in our report, and I've said to the European Parliament, that the Lithuanian authorities drew our attention to the accession treaty protocols. So I've made clear in 2 presentations already to the European Parliament, and I have another one next month, that Lithuania is something of a special case here, as I explained earlier. It's a big problem, and it needs careful, collective consideration in the interests of the solidarity of our European Union. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
I think it was a perfect presentation, giving a view on a huge project for Lithuania. So thank you very much. An extremely important project, Ignalina power plant closure. And I'm happy that the next speaker is our minister, who I think also can touch upon how the progress is going on and with the negotiations and how far we are. And we could see from given presentation that the financing gap is quite huge for our country, and it's extremely important to do as much effort as possible to close it. So I'll give the floor to our Minister of Energy, Žygimantas Vaičiūnas.
Dėkui labai. Ir iš tiesų dėl Ignalinos uždarimo galbūt.
Well, speaking about Ignalina decommissioning, I will probably come back at the end of my presentation, and I will try to stick to the same structure as the previous speaker did. Speaking about the priorities of our government, current government in the field of energy, first of all, I would like to express my satisfaction over this event today and ask the European Court of Auditors as well, because this is a good opportunity to discuss the future common activities. We are today in the Parliament of the Republic of Lithuania speaking about energy efficiency. I believe it is a very important symbolic detail, because energy efficiency actually depends on the efforts of all of us, all the citizens, and we should see it as an opportunity rather than the burden that brings short and long-term benefit to all of us. As far as the participants are concerned, I believe it is quite important that when speaking about the energy efficiency as a priority, the close cooperation between the government and the regulatory authorities is important, because very often we view auditors in a skeptical manner with some reservations, because, well, we are having some checks, so we'll have unfavorable conclusions, perhaps. And one of the means, one of the ways to avoid it is namely the close cooperation and checking intermediary performance results. Because when we have final performance results and evaluation, it will be too complicated to turn the circle back. When it comes to the energy priorities, first of all, we have to see where we are today. And in the past years, quite a big progress have been achieved in the energy field in many aspects, including the liquefied gas terminal, the infrastructure which is giving results and benefit today, which can be measured. It is being assessed. And this is not only a possibility to have an alternative supplier, but also something that gives benefit to the ultimate user. Let's say if we compare prices in 2012 and today, the gas price has dropped by about 43%, the heating price dropped by 38%, and the user, the end user, can feel the benefit directly. So the benefit of this project is quite evident. And when looking into the future, we have to understand that due to the technological changes, the renewable energy is becoming usual, regular energy. And we already speak about normal energy rather than an alternative source. Certainly, we need to support renewable energy to ensure its development, but I hope that in the future we will have renewable energy that can be successfully developed in market conditions. Of course, we need to ensure the necessary infrastructure, the balancing system, and we should not close ourselves just in the boundaries of Lithuania. We need to look at our neighboring states as well here. In the end of 2016, the package of clean energy was announced. And I'm really glad that these issues will be discussed more intensely starting from July this year already during Estonian presidency. I hope that this process will be faster and more efficient. Let's say yesterday, a very important agreement was concluded after several years' discussion. So most probably, we will have to put even more effort here in the future. When speaking about our goals, it is very necessary to know where we are heading. So today, the strategy is more or less clear. Our goal has been to ensure supply of alternative energy so that we can have a freedom of choice, which is related to more competition and lower prices of energy. Speaking about the strategy, today we have the strategy of 2012, and when understanding the interest of the market, that the strategy is worked out as fast as possible. In May this year, we are going to have public consultations And in June this year, we are going to refer it to the seimas. It will include the issue of balancing of energy security and competitiveness and similar matters. As far as our priorities are concerned, we could define them as continuity and change at the same time. It is not because it sounds nice, but this is the reality. We need to continue the implementation of our strategic project. Synchronization with European grids is one of them. Another priority is green energy oriented to the end user, as well as promotion of energy efficiency, because this is the field that hasn't been sufficiently at the focus, and this is why we need to restore the balance in our energy system. Development of interconnections and ensuring alternatives are very significant targets. Speaking about energy security, synchronization is one of the projects that needs to be completed. It's a long-standing project. It will be 10 years already since the agreement of the Baltic prime ministers related to the disconnecting from Brel ring. We have had a number of studies conducted related to alternative scenarios, and in the near future we can expect an agreement related to this scenario, specific scenario, so that we could start negotiations with the European transmission operators. Another important area of our activity is testing of isolated work, where we will not depend on the scenario, even though we have agreed regarding the synchronization through Poland. To implement these projects, we need to ensure funding from the European Union, and the agreement on this connection from IPS, UPS system is one of the key targets here. I'm really to hear the viewpoint of the European Court of Auditors that the European funding has to be used for such projects as efficiently as possible. Today we speak a lot about the development of new energy, wind energy, biogas. These are the fields that haven't been sufficiently developed in the recent years. Therefore, we need to have a vision, a clear vision for the period to 2020. We can say the same about the central heating system, where we shifted from 60% to 65% of biomass use, which is a significant change. However, we cannot stop here. Speaking about the end users, the renewable energy should bring the biggest possible benefit to each the user, and the renewable energy is the field that our citizens could contribute themselves. This is the field that today only most enthusiastic people dare to undertake, because a lot of bureaucratic procedures need to be overcome, and 44,000 of generating companies is our target by 2020. And looking into a long-term perspective, namely such energy generating users are at our focus. We have made estimations that we would not need very big investments from the state budget. And our target is a new model is facilities that would start operating from the 1st of January 2018. Speaking about efficiency of energy use, and when shifting to the main issue that we are discussing here today, I can note that recently we have witnessed some progress. In the period of 2010-2015, energy efficiency has risen by 20%. And if we speak about consumption, we are lagging behind compared to transmission and generation. And the situation needs to be changed. As far as our position among the European Union member states is concerned, a few years ago, our energy efficiency was 2.5 times higher, and today it's about 2 times higher. So this means there is some space where we can further improve, and each measure applied actually demands a lot of innovative approach. How we can achieve the targets set? It is very important to note that in November last year, a law was adopted in the Lithuanian Seimas, transposing the directive. Now we have clear goals, which is to save about 12 terawatt-hours of energy by 2020. And the biggest effect is expected from renovation of multi-flat buildings, transport sector, and industry, renovation of public buildings as well. Speaking about public buildings field, it is important to mention that back in 2014, the model was already developed. However, we haven't received any results so far as renovation is concerned, because it was partly due to the financing model, which was not really perfect. Therefore, this year, our goal is to renovate about 25% of public buildings. And this share of buildings should gradually increase. By 2020, we intend to renovate 70,000 square meters of public building space, and we could save 3.7 million euros of energy, of costs related to energy. Renovation of public buildings is the field where we have already saved about 3 terawatt-hours energy. Another important field I would like to mention is street lighting field. where we have a high potential, actually, and if the planned measures are implemented successfully, each year we would be able to save 3 to 5 million euros. The benefit is evident. However, on the other hand, we should not think only about saving, but also about some side effects related to safety and security, which will allow the municipalities to have a more favorable attitude to this field, so that instead of only saving, they could use some more efficient means to ensure higher efficiency. Replacement of non-efficient fuel boilers with more efficient biofuel boilers is one of our specific targets. And European support is envisaged here. We are consistently working with this measure, and we intend to implement it as soon as possible. Well, speaking about other measures, we should not forget implementation of smart accounting system. Previously, we had an evaluation that this accounting system is not likely to bring a big result. However, today we are conducting a new assessment, and in September this year we are going to have the results of this report. So it would be very useful related to our vision and implementation of the smart accounting system. Information of users is also one of the important measures, and so is the funding allocated to energy companies for energy efficiency projects. In May this year, we are going to sign the respective agreements that will allow our users to save energy not on their own account, but rather by shifting the burden on energy companies. This is the field where we are quite active, and we believe that the agreements will be signed in time and that their content will be really adequate. I have already mentioned the renovation of residential multi-storied buildings. Our target is 500 buildings annually. As far as efficiency of energy use in industry is concerned, we consider this to be quite an important field, and our goal is to have audits of big companies by the 1st of July this year. And here I speak about the companies that have at least 250 employees and the turnover of 40 million per year. As far as transport sector is concerned, this is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, and this is where we need joint efforts of the Ministry of Economy. And all these three measures are really related to our collaboration with other ministries. As far as the progress in 2014-2015 is concerned, Lithuania has already managed to save 2 terawatt hours of energy, and it accounts for 17.68% of the target of the goal that we have set. And I hope that we will be not less successful in achieving this goal of saving 1.5% on the yearly basis. We are focusing our attention on the targets set to 2020, and as far as Ignalina decommissioning is concerned, indeed the a report of the European Court of Auditors is a very important document in assessing the progress achieved. Of course, we see some critical moments there, because as mentioned before by Mr. Phil Owen, the situation today is that our situation is quite exceptional, and the document that we have is not something that we can cover, but we should look into the aspect and make the necessary assessment, because the polluter pays principle is really good in all cases. However, in our case, the situation was a bit different, and we had to take responsibility for the outcomes. In our case, we don't have any special accumulated fund, which really means a big challenge for the state as a whole, and our objective is to accelerate the process. We, of course, approve of the idea that new models have to be found so that the member states should complete the decommissioning efficiently and as fast as possible. However, the funding needs, which is more than 1 billion euros for the overall cycle of decommissioning, is quite a big burden. I have to note that more than 50% of the amount has been already allocated from the European Union funds, and to successfully complete the process, we need the remaining funds as well. This is a part of a long process. We speak about the principles today, and I believe that the negotiations regarding the multi-annual financial framework will be favorable. Thank you for your attention.
Pristatyti pozicijos būtent.
Thank you. I will now give the floor to Mindaugas Milčiūnas to speak about the National Audit Office and its role in energy audit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and to report on my opinion. I'm equally pleased to see here my head of office and the Minister of Finance. I'm pleased to, and I do hope that the ideas our institution will floor on works to be done in the sector will be heard, and the experts and legislators will hear that. The National Audit Office identifies problems on national audit programs in a following way. We make audit in two ways. On the first hand, we conduct strategic analysis, and our officials observe and monitor certain individual areas of the energy sector and risks. We also have insights after our audits, when not only we look into the specific problematics under the audit, but also we see the environment and we see the problems that the people face in this sector. The risks during our strategic analysis are subdivided under 8 criteria. We evaluate the risk as to how it relates to strategic documents, such as Europe 2020, Lithuania 2030, and government priorities, Lithuania's international commitments. We also look into how such risk is related with benchmarks. What are the benchmarks for Europe? What are the benchmarks for Baltic countries? What are the benchmarks for the world? We also look into public funds in the identified risk and the section of assets. We also look into the proposals from outside. We get proposals from the parliament committees. The responsible institutions will look into the media and the problems they raise. We look into the sector of society that relates to the risk we have identified, for which part of the society the risk is relevant. Our supreme officials have raised and discussed a number of the most important areas to be audited currently in our country. We also look at the risks through this context, through this prism. We assess the importance of the risk for vis-à-vis previous audits and the characteristics of the public sector. On the slide, you have the audits we have conducted over the past few years. The electricity sector transformation. Recommendations of the audit have not been implemented so far. The Parliament did not adopt so far amendments to legislation which are necessary. We also conducted the audit of electricity energy sector, the audit of multi-flat buildings, the heating and water systems, also Ignalina decommissioning, and potential of the renewables in Lithuania. In conclusion, the results of our strategic analysis demonstrate that there have been certain changes and positive changes in the energy sector, but we also have a number of challenges. As Minister has said, we have serious challenges ahead. And let me now speak on those challenges. Will the national energy strategy be renewed? We have misgivings about that. We do understand that any policy area of the state cannot be seen without a clear strategy and plans that define the main priorities and specific measures and actions. Where are we headed for in the energy sector? So far, we don't have this document on the table. We don't have the realistic energy strategy that complies with the requirements. There is a draft on the table, but so far it raises more questions than answers. The National Energy Strategy is a document that should provide clarity on matters such as energy. The current document is outdated, and the new strategy draft took a very long time to prepare. Last May, amendments and renewal of the strategy started, and we should have ended that by the August last year. In November, we learned that works are in the middle of the process, and Now minister says we will have it in June. So why is it important to have a strategy that is in line with today's challenges and needs? This is a document that measures and foresees our road far ahead. A badly prepared strategy would mean that the money spent on preparing it was not cost effectively spent. And worse than that, we can choose the wrong areas of development. This would create even more problems in future. We need to know the impact of the facilities we develop on the needs for energy and to eliminate the unfounded investment and reinvestment risks. Any decisions on the development of new energy projects would allow to modernize the existing capacities and will affect electricity, heating, natural gas and their prices. This will have an effect on the price of services and goods. So, in our opinion, the strategy should prepare the right foundations for competitiveness of Lithuania. We have to identify the local generation prospects, the prospects for costs, and it should be in line with Lithuania's realistic requirements for production and generation. And as auditors, we find it difficult and sometimes impossible to assess changes and effectiveness of investment, changes in the results, when we don't have a national energy strategy. Will the energy cost efficiency targets be achieved? The European leaders back in 2007 pledged to decrease energy by 20% by 2020. In 2012, they adopted Energy Efficiency Directive and foresaw that starting with 2014, we should annually renew the general area of the public institutions by at least 3%. Investment and commercial buildings have to be renewed and improved. The energy efficiency should be improved. Smart meters should be introduced. Energy Efficiency Directive also foresaw the main costs for energy consumption. Lithuania was authorized by 2014 to adopt an energy efficiency law and to detail the improvement in energy efficiency. Unfortunately, we only adopted it last year, at the end of the year. We now are in for more work. What's next? Will the EU and national support be oriented to the largest, to the measures that have the largest potential for energy efficiency? Will energy efficiency be promoted while allocating the national funds? Will energy efficiency of public buildings be promoted? Will we get sufficient focus on transport sector with the highest potential of energy efficiency, and how will the activities of all institutions be coordinated? After 2020, will we get funding for the decommissioning of the nuclear power plant? In 2009, on the 31st of December, in line with the accession treaty, Lithuania stopped its Ignalina's nuclear power plant. Before that, the Soviet Union built that facility so that it could serve not only Lithuania but the entire region, the entire Soviet Union. In the case of a war, that facility was to ensure that energy would go to northern and eastern regions of the Soviet Union. This is why the Ignalina facility was drafted and projected to be a strategic facility. It was the only one in the world to provide electricity from nuclear power. And it had to provide, and there were 4 nuclear reactors to be installed in our facility, but the Soviets only managed to install 2. That's a good luck for us, because otherwise we would have even more problems in decommissioning the reactors. Slovakia and Bulgaria also have similar problems, but it's more difficult for us to decommission because of the scope and scale of the project. This is why our decommissioning needs more time and more money. Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't have a deadline, because otherwise we can have a Chernobyl number 2 in Europe. We have a territory of 1,000 hectares, and there are tons of massive facilities. The number of employees so far is over 2,000. We have special security procedures, and there are checks on radiation pollution. The European Union, in acknowledgement of that, planned adequate additional financial support to Lithuania for the decommissioning. Now we have the funding until 2020, but we will need money also after 2020. We will not be able to do that alone. By 2020, we will have received 1.7 billion euros. It is estimated that by 2038, we will need an additional 1.6 billion euros. But so far, we are not sure whether we will receive it. So the Ministry of Energy is in for a challenge related to the decommissioning funding after 2020. Another question is, will the common interest projects in energy ensure us the opportunity to integrate into the European energy markets? In 2015, the European Commission adopted 195 most important energy infrastructure projects. These projects are the common interest projects. They are intended to integrate the European energy markets and to ensure variety of energy supply and roads of supply. And this would improve the energy union. This is intended to stop the energy isolation of certain countries such as Lithuania. It was intended that these projects would benefit from a better regulation and faster implementation. Let me mention some of them. The Lithuanian-Latvian gas pipeline, the Lithuanian-Latvian gas pipeline is the so-called KIPL, the synchronization of the Baltic countries with the continental European grid, the Kruonis water power plant, and the Litpol link. So is Lithuania in a place to generate the potential? I mean, we have energy projects worth of 1.5 billion euros. Will we have multiple sources and ways of energy generation? Will we have an energy union? Will we ensure energy security? Another question, one more on the list, is will the national regulation institution be truly independent? Is it truly independent right now? One of the key EU third energy package objectives is to ensure an effective system of national regulators that is independent from political processes and has enough power to control such facilities and audit and monitor their activities as well as use sanctions. In current energy sector, facilities are regulated and monitored by the public Commission for Costs and Energy. It sets the high thresholds for prices and monitors their implementation, also the setting of tariffs. Through implementation of its functions, the Price Commission has to be independent and to work independently and transparently. However, the current legislation provides the government and energy ministry with the right to regulate the process of setting prices regulated by the state. This, in part, limits the natural right of the Commission to make independent decisions. This creates the politicization of the energy sector through state-determined prices. This means that in the energy sector, the state-regulated prices are not independent and transparent. This problem has been floored by the European Audit Office in their special report. They noted that member states have to ensure the independence of the national institution that sets the prices, and their role shall not be limited by other authorities. So this is my list of questions on the puzzle of energy sector in Lithuania. I would invite us to complete the puzzle as soon as possible, Minister, before we face more problems which we'll have to soon tackle. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the positive presentation. And since the minister needs to leave shortly to another committee meeting, We will probably give the floor to him now, and then we'll have other questions. Thank you. Well, indeed, I've seen the title of the next presentation related to the grey box, so probably it will also answer some questions. It's very good that we are raising the issues so that we have better sector of energy in Lithuania. Just a few observations. First of all, related to independent regulatory institution and the principles that you have mentioned, also related to price mechanism. Indeed, we are trying our best to have an independent regulatory institution, and I just can inform you that on Wednesday this week, the government approved of the amendments of the legislation for implementing these principles. These amendments, these drafts will come to the seimas, and I very much hope for their favorable evaluation. Back in 2015, we had a list of projects of common interest that is going to be renewed at the end of this year. And let's say as far as Lithuania-Poland gas interconnection is concerned, we have received almost 300 million euros for the implementation of this project. A new route was suggested for the project, so the implementation now is projected for 2021, however, in a more efficient way, and we have assurance from Polish side that all the necessary works will be implemented. And we are going to sign the last agreements in the course of this year. As far as Kruonis project is concerned, this is one of the priorities of our current government, and in the meantime, the feasibility study is being finalized. As for Lithuania, Latvia gas interconnection, much depends on the Latvian side as well. The legal procedures are going to be finalized by the end of April, and I very much hope for more initiative from the Latvian side. We are going to carry out the feasibility study as well. Now, Litpol link. We can really be happy that this is the project that doesn't have any precedent in Europe, when methodology has been fully changed, and it was not very easy to get funding from the EU, but due to the creative approach of ourselves and the European Union, we managed to get it. As far as Ignalina is concerned, the principle that nothing has been agreed until everything is agreed can be applied here. We put very much focus on this matter. The minister has just came back from Brussels. We are speaking with the member states, with the Commission, with all the stakeholders, because we understand that the progress has been received in this particular field. The situation has significantly changed for the better. Of course, we cannot relax fully because we need to oversee the efficiency of the funds allocated. However, we need European solidarity here as well, because all the keys to this project are in Brussels and other European capitals. Therefore, we devote quite a lot of attention to this. I will not repeat what has been already said regarding the strategy. The renewal of the process of the renewal of the strategy started back in December 2012, and the draft will be submitted in May this year. However, much will depend on the seimas afterwards. Of course, we are very much interested to have the strategy that fully satisfies the existing needs. Thank you, Vice Minister. And today with us we have an expert from the Secretariat of Energy Community. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today, and I thank you for the invitation to the National Auditor's Office, which is my most favorable institution in Lithuania, actually. Before I start my presentation, let me introduce myself. I am Andrius Šimkus, a gas expert. I work in the Secretariat of the Energy Community in Vienna, and this is the organization established by the European Commission that works with the candidates, potential candidates to the member states, including Ukraine, Moldova, Western Balkan countries. And last week, the Georgian parliament ratified the protocol after long discussion, so today we have a new member state. What we do is we work with all energy sectors, excluding the nuclear sector. We also work with transport policy. We do everything. In other words, we perform European Commission's function with respect to our member states. We are also drafting the secondary legal acts. We participate in transforming the markets. However, due to the lack of time and lack of funding, we cannot fully cover all the fields. Even though I am a gas expert myself, I would like to inform you that even though I mainly work with gas markets, I am not representing any promoters of fuel in Lithuania nor elsewhere. And this is probably why I have been invited to speak here today, because I do not represent any political power in Lithuania or Europe. And my only interest as a lawyer is the law of European energy. What I'm going to speak today about is the test of the grey box in Lithuania. Information technology specialists know this test very well. However, we can borrow some methodology from this test in other sectors. The energy strategy in Lithuania is more of a mystical category, even though the minister sounded quite optimistic that very soon we'll have new contents, clear contents. However, as far as this grey box is concerned, when speaking about the vision of energy sector in Lithuania, the big energy projects are more or less completed. What was started by the 15th government, when Mr. Kubilius was the prime minister, all the projects actually overcame that implementation process. We have been looking for the new strategy for a long time, and the biggest achievement of the last ministry in energy sector was the successful terminal of liquefied gas. And today we have one of the successful examples we can boast in the European Union and show example to other member states. I will come back to that later. And indeed, what the current government policy illustrates is that energy policy is not at the focus. Therefore, I was very happy to listen to the minister, and I'm really very hopeful that the new government and the new Ministry of Energy will be active enough and achieve the main targets. We don't speak about major energy projects today. The Prime Minister didn't mention energy at all in his government report recently. The answer is quite clear. The populism is quite popular in Lithuania, like it is in the rest of Europe. So the projects where you cannot get many favorable votes are not popular. But energy does not only cover interconnections, the nuclear energy. It also means everyday activities, inclusion of users into the generation of energy, and so on and so forth. That was my introduction, but now let us look at the projects that have been implemented in Lithuania, as well as the expectations that we have in relation with energy strategy. So, briefly about the grey box test. Each of the processes in information technology field, it's mainly related to the software. We know the properties, and the assessment is made by the user who knows the properties, who can evaluate the capabilities of the developer. What I want to say here is that energy strategy is created behind the closed doors, which should not be the case. Who else than energy specialists, energy companies know how the system should function better? So we have the government that is developing the new energy strategy behind the closed doors. Again, the minister said that in May we are going to discuss the strategy and submit it to the seimas in June this year. Well, the interest group stakeholders should be involved in the process, in my opinion, as early as possible. Based on the laws, the strategy needs to be reviewed every 3 years. Every 5 years, okay. It may be corrected every 5 years. So the direct function of the ministry lies here. The strategy is a live organism, and in my opinion, it should be reviewed every year. Circumstances are changing, and the global world, which Lithuania is a part of, is not an exception. It is a continuous process. And if we start from planning, from the vision, from assessing our weak and strong points, monitoring and revision, the process should be continuous. So adopting a strategy every 5 years means that it is only a paper, a piece of paper. And if we look at the National Independence Strategy of 2012, which was a challenging document at that time, the biggest share of the process is outdated, and it was not implemented because the strategy was not reviewed in time. We should not forget, as Mindaugas mentioned, that the strategy is the document that needs to set guidelines for everyday use rather than contain beautiful pictures. Criteria and indicators that bring energy sector forward. First of all, we should speak about energy independence, which is a wide concept, and we could go on speaking about it in different aspects. However, systematic sufficiency is one of the key aspects here. Then comes diversification of supply. We can speak about diversification of sources, resources, as well as suppliers. Integration of markets and systems. The world is becoming more and more global, and one of the directions for Lithuania is primarily to integrate its market with the Baltic states and expand further. Accessibility of energy resources. Speaking about big, major energy projects, the ultimate addressee, the end user, is forgotten, and the possibility to choose is one of the key targets here. We have no users who would have chosen an independent gas supply in Lithuania today. And finally, we come to the single energy policy of the EU. Well, of course, we have processes like Brexit, the elections that have shaken Europe, although I am quite optimistic about the election processes. But still, there are things that drag Lithuania down. For instance, dependence on suppliers and sources, promotion of energy sources. And here I speak about the promotion of natural gas. It's very good that we have the liquefied gas terminal, but we cannot plan the overall gas market. It would be stupid. A lack of localization of integration. In some aspects, international relations, we observe the locality of interests, inability or unwillingness to look further. I will bring an example a little later. Monopolization of markets. When we had lrs.lt in Lithuania, it was called a monster. So today, the state has actually monopolized the market fully, and I don't see any problem when speaking about natural monopolies. Let's say when we speak about iron, that is transmission networks. But when the state interferes into the commercial sector, generation and supply, it actually has a negative effect. Because we have the decision maker and the supplier at the same time, in the same person. And the last point I would like to mention is the sabotage of Lithuanian interests. Very often we heard people stating they represent the Greens in Lithuania, As an example, we can take, let's say, a shale gas
žaliųjų nežinia finansuojamų kokiais interesais. Suskystintų gamtinių dujų terminalas.
project.
Taip pat
Liquefied gas terminal also had to face very big challenges when a special commission was formed to investigate the project. Thanks God, the project is being successfully implemented and is one of the most successful energy projects in Europe. Lithuania is presented as a role model on the European Union scale today. Visaginas nuclear power plant project has been also condemned. However, as a citizen, I believe that the processes will be reviewed. So in every case, we have the opposition force that works not in the interests of Lithuania. Let us speak about the puzzle that we already heard before about. What can we put into the puzzle? Well, natural gas. That is one of the key resources in Lithuania. It is a natural process that after decommissioning the nuclear power plant, gas was among the main sources of energy until in the heating sector we gradually shifted to biofuel. Gas reaches Lithuania from Russia through Yamal pipeline and also liquefied gas terminal. And let us hope that its significance in the future will further increase. When referring to the infrastructure, I will mention the future of liquefied gas terminal. The interconnection with Poland. Lithuania doesn't speak much about this aspect. Is Nord Stream project. This is a killer project that Russia, together with German and Austrian companies, is currently implementing, and I would not like to go too deep into Nord Stream project because it's a separate topic. One of the biggest risks here is that full operation of Nord Stream will suspend or even stop transit of energy through Ukraine. Ukraine's pipeline and supply via Yamal pipeline might be also suspended. Technical possibilities play a very important role, so the question arises whether we will have sufficient technical capabilities to pump gas via Poland to Lithuania. Remains a very big question. Here we need a goodwill from the part of Germany as well. The European Union is not speaking fully in one voice, and the position of Germany is really saddening us. As far as I know, Lithuania is not actively communicating with Germany
Todėl, kad realiai dėl
so far,
techninių savybės GD terminalas ne kiekvienu
and
momentu ir ypatingai pikinio vartojimo
our
metu
liquefied gas
žiemą
terminal
neužtikrins
will not be
pakankamai dujų,
capable
kiek reikia
to
sistemai.
ensure the necessary
Tai ką
amount
daryt,
of
kad
gas
kad
for the
Lietuvoje būtų
system in the
mažinamas,
future.
gamtinių dujų
So what
vartojimas.
needs to be done to
Iš
decrease the
tikrųjų,
use
aš
of
nežinau,
natural
ar tai yra
gas in
tiesa, ar
Lithuania?
vėlgi,
I don't know
kada
whether
esi
this
šiek tiek
is
toliau nuo tos
true or
Lietuvos ir
not,
skaitai žinias.
but
Kalbant apie
I
Vilniaus
have
šiukšlių deginimo
read a
elektrinės
lot of
projektą, pasigirsta įvairių nuomonių
articles
ir neva energetikos komisija buvo iškomunikavus, kad tai yra rizikingas projektas, nes dėl
that
to
as
mažės
far
gamtinių
as
dujų vartojimas ir galimai brangs
waste incineration project in Lithuania is concerned, the project will result in a higher gas price for the end user in Lithuania.
Ir terminalui, pereinant į komercinę sritį, nesugeba šito suvaldyti.
If Lithuania does not manage the process, is a very strong signal. Our friends Greens state it is quite hazardous to have waste incineration plant so close to the city. So if we look at this picture, you see the chimney in Vienna. Actually, I see it from my window. I myself use water and heating energy coming from waste incineration plant. And Vienna is considered to be one of the cleanest capital cities of Europe. So probably we should not see the threat where it does not exist. Certainly, we should focus our attention on decarbonization while refusing the fossil fuels and introducing technologies minimalizing the hazardous emissions. As far as renewable sources are concerned, this is one of the key directions of the European Union today, and this is also a very important topic. I have participated in the law on renewable sources in Lithuania. The system needs to be reviewed essentially, because if you remember 4 or 5 years ago, when the new minister came and the funding for solar facilities was totally cut, actually the process could be managed by using other means. What I can say is that it was not the business groups who were involved in lobbying suffered most. There were some gaps in the law that allowed dividing plots of land into smaller ones and have solar facilities installed.
So further projects were stopped. But for that, in Pasvalys, we would have a 6 megawatts solar park. One of the strategic steps would be to review the strategic regulation of use of renewables in Lithuania. What are the alternatives? Do we have other alternative sources? This is the balance, biomass, renewables, and solar. No, not necessarily. Under the strategy developed by the Energy Institute and published last year in the Energy Commission website, the Visaginas nuclear power plant project was still there. Nuclear power after Fukushima lost any attractiveness in the EU. The EU and the Commission never said its word in favor or against. So Hungary is allowed to develop nuclear. And it's still part of national policy making. I hope that soon member states will only be implementers, not deciders on the nuclear policy. So my answer would be, as a lawyer, that I don't see any other alternatives for Lithuania before modern technologies are available in the market. As to the infrastructure, on the left you have Elektrėnai. It's the main energy producer. We have other heat-producing facilities. And one of the most important priorities is the reduction of gas use and the movement to biomass and reduction of emissions. The renewables include bioenergy, and we have optimistic views on that. Renewables are no longer an alternative, they are part of our life. The price now is equal, in many cases, to conventional energy sources, and sometimes even is cheaper, especially if we consider wind energy. In Lithuania, we have a project to create a wind energy park in the Baltic Sea. I hope it will not be monopolized by the state and that transparent conditions will be created for participants. Because if we were to talk about subsidies and state support, the subsidies and state support should be provided on the basis of a tender. This is not just a vision. This is clearly written in the natural gas article number 3 directive. And we have to transfer that into national law, so I hope that previous intransparent tenders will be analyzed and averted. LNG terminal is one of the most interesting examples in both technological and legal aspects. Lithuania has expanded the concept of services that are in line with public interest. So the LNG terminal is now in line with the EU law. And this is an example where a new infrastructure project was introduced into a market that had been 100% monopolized. A new potential provider has been included into the market, and this was a challenge. We need effective regulating mechanisms for that. And our example has shown that it is possible. A similar principle is now used by Moldavia. The Moldovan-Romanian link will also be the same remedy to market monopolization. The Visaginas nuclear power plant project is a dead project. We should no longer put it into the strategy. It's a boring debate on the pros and contras of nuclear power. But the Visaginas power plant, regardless of the high ambitions and logics behind and the rationale, regardless of the efforts and money spent, the project was debunked. And the present hysteria about the Belarusian nuclear power plant would not exist if we had a Visaginas power plant. Should the draft be and the project be developed in time, the project would have been completed. Two powerful reactors instead of a small reactor were not the right solution. But any time, it's no time to invest into nuclear. Renewables are much cheaper now than nuclear, and they don't pose such a risk. As for links, we have two links which have finally solved the problem of energy as isolation. We have been integrated with Europe through links to Poland and Sweden. We have the Jupol project with Poland, which is to be finalized by 2020. This will create an opportunity for Lithuania to buy gas from Western markets, including LNG terminals. So we are in for more suppliers. We will also be able to exchange gas, natural gas on the border. So this will also provide us with more opportunities. Needless to say, as Minister has mentioned before, for a number of years now, we have an independent country, but we still are dependent in the energy sector from Russia, and we are fully dependent on its balancing and management of the system. We need to solve this problem as soon as possible. All governments are working towards that. The project has been implemented during a lengthy time because of the lack of consensus between Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania, as well as because of the varying interest in the EU and the funding questions, which are equally important. As for international relations, I directly would like to speak about Lithuania's partners, potential and existing partners, and the opportunities. We have the Baltic countries. It's sad to see countries in the EU in the playing field, playing games, and willing each of them to be a hub. This will not be the case. The systems are too small. The general use and consumption of biogas will be under 4 billion cubic meters in the Baltic countries. So the systems are too small to be isolated. They have to be integrated and to create a joint market and a joint system. So this would be my wish to all the Baltic countries. Our next target is Scandinavian countries. Norway is Russia's greatest supplier of natural gas. And I believe that Lithuania's energy market is functioning now as a part of the Nordic market. I strongly believe that in natural gas, the cooperation with Norway will continue, and other interests will not prevail. Our key strategic partner is Poland, both in political and energy terms. Politically, Poland's voice is heard in the EU always, and the Baltic voice is not always heard in the EU. Poland's political views in relations with Russia are consistent in comparison to Lithuania's. So if we talk about Russia's energy processes, its aggression against Ukraine, and Poland's political stance is consistent. So we have a good partner in Poland. In terms of gas provision and supply security, I hope in the very best implementation of the JIPL. Gas will come from Western European countries to Baltic countries, and we will only have to open our market for wider operation. Central European countries could also think about potential partners, such as Germany. So far, I don't believe Russia will limit the Yamal gas pipeline flows, but there are some fears concerning that, and this will be a political tool. We know that Russia is known for using energy sector as a political tool. Our next partner is Russia. Some members of parliament think that we need to learn a lot from Russia. I cooperate with Ukraine on a daily basis. Do go to eastern Ukraine and you will learn something from Russia there. Russia is an aggressor of the 21st century who occupied a part of territories of two sovereign states. It's governed by a criminal regime, so it's hardly possible to talk about good terms of cooperation. The Russian gas is good, it's just gas, but the general political attitude in the EU is not to refuse the Russian gas altogether, but to reduce it to the level that Russian suppliers and their partners in the EU have equal commercial conditions and a level playing field as the suppliers of other EU member states. I have an example of Trinidad and Tobago, which is also a supplier of gas to the EU. So whatever the size of the market, whether it's the market of Russia or market of Trinidad and Tobago, the level playing field for all should be ensured in the EU. This is an ideal. As for practical level, in Germany's actions, we can see that ideas and practice go their separate ways. Former Chancellor Schröder was in favor of Nord Stream 1, and maybe he will also get employment after Nord Stream 2 is implemented. It's funny because if we close down nuclear power plants in Germany, they will probably reduce the use of nuclear power plants in Germany and France, so natural gas will increase in consumption and before renewables go on the increase. So Germany will probably go more dependent on Russia, up to 75%. That's sad. But at the level of ideas, in the energy community sector, we intend to reduce the gap between the shares of the market by suppliers and to increase competition so that all suppliers enjoy equal conditions. And when competition is in place, there's no need for corruption or any other matters. Independent regulators can help to avoid those problems. As for Belarus, this is our single forgotten neighbor. President Lukashenko has once visited our country with flowers to our president, but this was the end of it. Isolation of Belarus is clearly felt. This makes Belarus go closer to Russia. Belarus asked for an observer status at our secretariat, and this was our diplomatic victory. This was the first time when Belarus asked for any role in any organization in the European sphere. Guess who is the worst enemy of this Belarus's initiative? Lithuania is. Lithuania says it will not support Belarus's candidacy as long as Astravo question is not solved. How do we solve the Astravo question? Are we to be happy that Belarus will destroy the nuclear power plant there? Or are we to be happy with the security tests and stress tests implemented once they are implemented in Belarus? Of course, we can see the problem of the nuclear power plant near our borderline, but the process is already well developed, and this is why it's not clear. As an energy community, we suggest we should take in Belarus as an observer and start implementing the EU law principles there, and then move on to energy systems. It's a long-term process, but we know that Lithuania's process was also long after we became independent. As for the Belarusian nuclear power plant in Astravets, there was a lot of enthusiasm on the law that nobody will buy any energy from Astravets nuclear power plant. But the first draft of the project was drafted in the Ministry of Energy under Sekmokas. This was the very first draft. It was adopted at a time during the 15th government. Should it have been adopted back then, it would have stopped or could have stopped the construction of a nuclear power plant in Astravets. This would have closed the market for the energy from there, and Russia might have stopped its investment. But the government, the 15th government, failed to adopt the law. Now, the Astravets nuclear power plant construction project has entered the point of no return. Besides, the Belarusian market is increasing. So this new law will not provide any deterrence. Lithuania now has a separate ambassador who tours Europe asking for support on Astravets nuclear power plant. Political support is one thing, but business and markets are quite a different thing. Let's take our neighbor Poland. Should it need to import large volumes of energy, and should Belarus provide cheaper energy? I have no doubts Poland would buy energy from nuclear power plant in Belarus, because electricity has no color, it has no
bet ne rezultatų.
smell.
Dabar kalbant apie Lietuvos poziciją, sakykime,
As for Lithuania's position, Austria
tokių didžiausių branduolinės energijos kritikų, aš
is a
prisimenu,
huge critic of nuclear power. And I remember I took part as a lawyer in the nuclear power plant project development in Visaginas, and Austria immediately sent us a criticizing letter. But we were laughing back then. We thought Austria was too far away. But right now, several weeks ago, I attended a conference there. I talked to Austrian officials, and they said they supported Lithuania because Austria is de facto against nuclear power. And by 2030, it will be completely dependent on renewables.
Tai tokia pastaba buvo iškomunikuota, kad mes palaikom Lietuvą, bet mes
The Austrians told me they supported Lithuania, but they didn't trust us. Why? They said because Lithuania was acting against Astravets nuclear power plant, but it intends to build a nuclear power plant in Visaginas. I told them this project was a dead end. But the Austrians told me we still have a valid strategy, and there are some words on the Visaginas there. So my message to you is that we have to systematically and consistently inform our guests, our friends and international partners on what is happening in real time. As for markets, we have to deal with the matter, and internal market should not be monopolized, because a monopoly, whether it's a private or state-owned, has the same features and doesn't allow to have competition. It doesn't allow end users to choose their suppliers. We have to diversify imports, and we have to maximize our potential. Our potential markets are the Baltic countries, Latvia and Estonia. Starting with April, we're looking forward to opening the Latvian market. It's open by a legal way, but it's not open in real ways. LNG is already part of the Estonian market, and it is set to develop. It will become a commercial facility, and public budget will not be needed for the operation of the LNG terminal. Our potential security partners should include Belarus and Germany once JUPL is implemented, and Ukraine, because Ukraine, in the critical accident, if transit through Ukraine is stopped, Ukraine is now investing a lot into increasing their own gas production, natural gas production. So it is a potential partner for Western Europe and for Lithuania if it connects with Poland. What happens? What's in store for us at the end of the tunnel? In literature, you sometimes have two options, whether either it's light or it's light from a train. In energy policy, it's quite different. We have permanent lamps, small lamps in this tunnel. Sometimes we have small lamps, then we have large lamps that we can monitor by gestures and voice. their voice controlled. So what are the priorities? As I previously mentioned, and as all speakers mentioned, the energy strategy has to be adopted as soon as possible, and it has to have clear guidelines. Our priorities for energy policy should be established. The Energy Union is the flag which the European Commission has raised in cooperation with other EU institutions, and we should follow these priorities. What are these priorities? This includes import diversification and an opportunity to choose the price, to choose the supplier, and to choose the ways of implementation. Decarbonization. We should not use fossil fuels in the future. This is already the past of the energy sector, so renewables should be developed. And this is the new guideline for our state to follow. Of course, in order to balance out the system, we will have to use natural gas for a long term, let's say 20 to 30 years. But hopefully by 2030, Europe will have made a huge transformation, and the use of fossil fuels and natural gas will be reduced by minimum. We have to attract investment from abroad. This will not be possible if we reinforce our monopoly, especially in energy production. Third energy package. Transfer processes. When Lithuania wanted to free itself from the Gazprom, have already been these targets have already been attained. Lithuania, under 15th government, has been successful in implementing these processes. So we have to open the market for competition in gas and power. My civil opinion is that our energy policy should be transparent, but it is not.
Apie galimą Seimo narių bendradarbiavimą su Rusijos specialiosiomis tarnybomis, tokių dalykų turi nelikti. Ir mes labai dažnai susilaukiame kritikos iš ES valstybių,
from the EU member states that we are afraid to invest in Ukraine or Moldova because there is corruption there. And it's not known whether they work in favor of Russia or not. Georgia decided to join the energy community by 89 votes out of 89. So we should remember ourselves and to set an example for others. It's said that Lithuanian experts go to Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia. I hope they are not just touring. I hope they also get some practical experience and transfer that experience. We should think of ourselves in terms of practical experience too. This is a criticism not only to state officials but also to voters. We need to have transparent communication. If you ask anyone near the Seimas about the energy strategy of Lithuania and its main objective, nobody will tell you. Maybe maybe they will tell you it's Visaginas nuclear power plant, even though that referendum happened and everyone voted against. This project is still very well known, and let me remind you that populism and nice projects is not everything that's important. Public communications need to be transparent and efficient in order to clearly say what are the alternatives and what are the targets for Lithuania. Interest groups need to be engaged. Energy experts need to be engaged. Strategy should not be drafted again
su teisės aktais taip pat būna, vis dėlto Lietuvoje viešasis
doors.
teisės aktų yra ydingas, taip pat ir teisėkūros sistema yra ydinga, kada Seimas
The legislative system is, it's wrong that members of parliament can provide amendments in the very last session. Legal gaps result. And institutions that are to be acting against corruption find it impossible to do their work. And users should be informed so they can choose an independent supplier. In the energy market, some changes are happening, but there's no wholesale market for gas in Lithuania. We are hoping for more providers, but they don't exist. So these are the priorities, and this is our message to you. Thank you for the floor. I'm ready to take your questions.
Dėkojame už tokį išsamų pristatymą.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive presentation. And now we really have time for discussion, questions and answers. I'm really happy that we have Energy Commission representatives. So probably we should start from Virgilijus Poderys, the chair of the Commission, then Artūras Skardžius, member of the Commission, and anyone willing to. Thank you, Chair. I understand today we are focusing mainly on energy in the context of the activities of the National Auditor. Well, speaking about the strategy, first of all, the first thing is that our country has been successfully implementing some projects that were not included in the strategy and is not implementing those that are included. So the question arises, do we need the strategy altogether? And if we have a strategy that is reviewed on the annual basis, will our life become easier then? So my question is it possible, in the light of the current circumstances, have a long-term strategy altogether? The National Energy Agency has issued a number of reports as to how we often make mistakes while predicting, because it's very difficult to guess what's going to happen in 5 or 7 years because of the fast development of technologies. Perhaps it's not so bad that we don't have a renewed strategy, a binding legal document. So here in the Parliament, having an event here in the Parliament, we should not guess whether we should abide by laws. Of course, we are supposed to. We must abide by laws. But now I'm speaking about the common sense. So probably this is something to start the discussion regarding the strategy. Now, a few other things that should be of concern to the national auditor. Let's say cogeneration power plants. The first question, should the state go to the sector which is competitive? Should the state enter that field? Maybe the national auditor should ask this question. First of all, not only related to this particular project, but other projects as well. Because direct foreign investments might be interested to come into those sectors, which would bring benefit to the state. All the business related to the waste, including incineration plants. We constantly raise the question whether it's necessary to have the incineration plant at all, or shall we have the sufficient amount of waste, and so on and so forth. Another point is related to efficiency of the energy companies. A few days ago, you released a report on the efficiency of the companies owned by the state and owned by municipalities. And energy companies are considered to be well managed. However, I would like to point out that the profit is taken as factor number one in assessing the company's activities. Because if companies receive the biggest amount of their profit revenues from monopolistic activities, this should not be the case when assessing the companies. And I believe that the state should have very few companies that are rated on the grounds of profitability. Because then the company should be operating in an efficient market. But then a question arises, why should the company then be state-owned?
Gerai, dėkojame energetikos komisijos pirmininkui.
Thank you to the chair of the Commission of Energy.
Ir tada vadovas, gerai, valstybės audito ir...
National auditor, perhaps?
Manyčiau, kad mūsų
įdomus prisipažinimas čia man jūsų skambėjo. Manyčiau, kad mūsų valstybėje tada reikalai yra prastesni,
jeigu valstybės kontrolė pradės žaisti katės ir pelės žaidimą su pačiu parlamentu.
Your confession is quite queer to my ears, because if we have a strategy and we are following it in the course of 5 years, somebody then said that our strategy is not to have any strategy. Sounded a bit surprising to me. But as in the opening of the conference, I mentioned that in the life of greatest leaders, we have examples that, well, I am the kind of the person that I don't have any strategy in life. This is why it will be difficult for you to conquer me. I'm not predictable. Then, in cases like that, any national audit does not have any sense, because we are coming to assess whether the obligations in one or another field have been properly met. Of course, we have cases when we are sent out to check whether some troops are there in place, and it happens that we bring the information which is different from anticipated. So, as other speakers noted, we are really wasting money for national audits, for state audits, because when checking a company or a project, it is then necessary to assess the efficiency if you don't have the overall context. And this is why people in Europe still do not know, even Lithuanian people still do not know whether we are going to have the nuclear power plant in our country or not. I mean the Visaginas project. For the National Auditor's Office as a state institution, this is not good news, actually. Well, from a personal viewpoint, speaking about strategies, I have an explanation as follows, that the strategy is a document meant not only to tell what is going to be implemented, but it has one good property. Each good strategy makes public the information what is not going to be implemented, where we will not have funding. On the one hand, we may be willing to implement some projects, and on the other hand, we are not willing to inform the public, even though this is not quite the topic of today. However, speaking about our latest reports about the companies, you will have a possibility to look into it, because the package includes 3 audits related not only to state-owned companies, but also municipal companies and public companies of Lithuanian municipalities, showing all the existing links. And speaking about the profit, there is probably not at the focus of our attention. The essential thing that we have found is that the lacking links between different parts of management chain. Sometimes there are companies that seem to be used just to cover the shortcomings. So that was my short intervention. 2 more participants willing to comment. I believe we already heard the National Auditor's view. Well, on the other hand, the European Union has its own energy strategy, a strategy of individual sectors, to be more precise. Therefore, I don't believe that Lithuania is so advanced that it doesn't need any strategy at all. The second thing is, you mentioned the word annual plan. Yes, indeed. Our perception of the strategy probably differs. And this is why I showed one of my slides regarding continuous process, because the strategy should cover short-term, medium-term, and long-term measures. Short-term measures should receive a feedback, and specific steps needs to be included in the strategy to implement certain measures. Accountability and responsibility is key here. And you mentioned common sense, so then the question arises, who adopts the laws in Lithuania? This is the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. Seimas has the unique right in Lithuania to make laws effective. This is the direction I suggest to go. And our guest, Mr. Phil Owen.
Thank you. If I may offer a European Court of Auditors perspective on this, gleaned from all our audit work. I think it would be a good idea for every member state to have a coherent, consistent energy and climate strategy. Firstly, for your own sake, because on such a complex, diverse, rapidly moving issue, it's important for any nation to try and forge understanding and consensus, not just amongst politicians, but also with citizens about what you are trying to achieve. But secondly, and this is the point I wanted to offer, if you look at the European Union's Commission's current proposals under the winter package, they envisage developing a system of accountability which, if agreed, will require the examination of regular energy and climate strategies from member states. So if you don't have a strategy over time, you may be embarrassed. I mean, that may not be agreed, but I think that's a proposal. The second thing I wish to say is, I thought it was very helpful, the previous talk, about what constitutes a strategy. And I've written a lot of bad strategies and some slightly better ones, so let's all learn from each other's mistakes as well as successes. But I think in future, energy and climate strategies, given the dynamic changing environment which I spoke about in my initial talk, will need to be very flexible. So I would encourage you as parliamentarians to resist the temptation to look for big, expensive projects and to look for strategies that are based on flexibility in response to that dynamic environment. So the sort of things I would be looking for are regional LNG terminals rather than big gas pipelines, for instance. We said that in our internal energy market study. I would be looking for backup. I would be looking for interconnection facilities between member states that are actually used once built to full capacity. I would be looking for the development of electricity storage, diversity of supply, and therefore flexibility, and also the development of new sources, like the examination that's going to be done of offshore wind in the Baltic. There's a lot of good things, features about what you already have, that has the makings of a very good strategy, but I would advise that it would be sensible to try and write it down and gain agreement collectively on it. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Tai pabaigai turime du klausimus.
We have two questions for the end. I was mistakenly taken. I am actually not against the strategy, but probably what we need to do is to change our approach to it. Probably as an example, well, the EU is believed to be very good at making strategies. Let's say 5 years ago, in our documents, we had a statement that in 5 years' time, we are going to have a very well-functioning electricity market, which was not actually the case. Now we have a winter package, and it's okay. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact how we create strategies, how we draft them. There are strategic decisions on the EU level, on the member states level, that are not being implemented. And Artūras Skardžius now. Thank you, Chair, guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the comprehensive presentations. In particular, Mr. Mindaugas, the National Auditor. It was long ago since I heard such an open conversation, open dialogue in this building. Indeed, the latest strategy was adopted in summer 2012. The past government actually had only paper projects. Our government implemented all the projects de facto, completed the projects, including the interconnections and the LNG terminal. Today we still hear people saying it was not necessary for Lithuania. I am convinced it is necessary, but what we are discussing today is the costs that could have been 3-4 times lower. Let's say the terminal cost was $250 million, whereas Lithuania will pay about $900 million if we decide to acquire the vessel. roughly 900. The contract with Bermudes, not Oslo, as it turned out. These are the essential things. These are some of the 22 questions from the Commission. The contract regarding the gas. We were buying gas from Statoil in the first year, paying 34% more compared to the price that other European Union member states were paying. I'm speaking about the port price. What we experienced was 45 million. That was the first year. And the end user experienced the high prices as well. Let me draw your attention to the following. Let us first of all assess our aspirations and the size of the market. What heating market, electricity market, and gas market we have, gas consumption market we have. We can implement lots of different projects. We have local and foreign investors willing to participate, particularly Scandinavian countries. However, our end user has to pay for everything. Therefore, we have to decide what fuel we are using in Lithuania. This should be clearly defined in the strategy. Whether we use local fuel, biofuel. We have big potential for biofuel. We have peat potential in this country, excellent resources. And the gas market, Mr. Andrius, may I inform you, is 700 million cubic meters. Half goes to heating, half to electricity. The biggest private consumer user is Achema, fertilizer manufacturing company. The capacity of the vessel, LNG vessel, is 4 million cubic meters. It is not a commercial object. It is actually a burden to each user. Therefore, we can speak about the strategy. Of course, we would have need to change the strategy after finalizing this project, upon deciding which fuel we are going to use in Lithuania. Let's say, well, sitting in Brussels, you may say, well, you can buy Russian fuel through the interconnection in Poland, or you can buy Russian gas through Latvia. Latvians have in Čukalnis terminal. Speaking about gas exchange with Estonians, we cannot do it in physical terms. So these are my observations. I agree that the state monopolies is not a good thing. But this is the case that we have in Lithuania, which prevents free competition, because monopolies influences politicians and public relations as well. All of us have to pay for this because we are affected by these decisions. An aspect regarding the wind power facility in the Baltic Sea was mentioned. However, we don't have it in the strategy today. Nevertheless, a state monopoly representative is very much interested to implement this project in Lithuania. However, how much will it cost to the user? Its connection only would cost 165 million euros. There is nobody that would not allow to conduct an environmental assessment. You and me, Mr. Andrus, were working together a few years ago. The biggest permit issued was for 6 megawatts. The tariff that we had at that time was 1.50 liters. That was before the euro was introduced in Lithuania. So the question arises, how much can the user, end user, pay without having clear priorities and directions?
So all the end users have to pay the price. We should not allow this happening. I know that National Audit Office knows that the Kruonis and Kaunas water power plant, they are the main generators of electricity, and water is the main source of electricity. And now there is no regulation. No Minister of Energy can regulate them. No one can make them regulated for some reason. You mentioned the energy strategy of 10 to 12, and we don't have the legal basis for that so far. The National Audit Office looked for the decree, it didn't find. Could we talk about the public procurement law? We have non-controlled services in the energy tariffs. It's a problem, it's a huge problem and a huge challenge. It's a threat to our prices and our energy security. As for wind energy, we should make the decision to amend the law and to increase the quotas. And it's only later that we can talk about mechanisms. I'm in favor of renewable energy. It's a pity that after Fukushima reactor was blown up, somebody tried to push onto us a reactor that was left over. It's only the end users that pay the final price, and it's sad. Thank you. We're outside the time limit. A brief reaction. Thank you, Mr. Skardžius. This is a large debate. But as for LNG terminal costs, the LNG terminal started operating, and it's only afterwards that Gazprom made a discount of 27% for Lithuania. It would be naive to think that it was a coincidence. Thank you, gentlemen. A day is ahead, but our time is limited. I would like to thank our guests, and I wish you a nice day.